Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. I have a check-in system and turn into God on Earth. Chapter 61. I never lie. Lu Lin said lightly. He seemed to have completely forgotten that he had just used Thanos' affairs to deceive these Shandar starmen who didn't know anything. Besides, you have a huge empire, and you don't even have this intelligence capability. I've killed all of them, so you won't have to wait days to hear from you, will you? Seeing Lu Lin's disdainful eyes, everyone in Shandar Star was immediately embarrassed. A few people gave 2 orders, and soon the intelligence officers began to get busy. On the other side, Xingju came to Lu Lin's side. When do you plan to return to Earth? I don't know, Lu Lin replied lazily. Why, do you want to go back with me? I have no intention of returning to Earth. Xingju waved his hand again and again. There are so many fun things on Earth, I don't know why you always want to go back. Why don't you come and be a bounty hunter with me? Bounty hunters are fun. Not going, Lu Lin said lazily. What is fun about bounty hunters, and you may not be able to earn much money if you are tired. Look, Star-Lord poked Lu Lin's shoulder with his elbow, pointed at Tony and said, Tony must need actual combat training to develop new weapons and improve his armor, right? What better way to experiment than to be a bounty hunter? Besides, since you have nothing to do when you go back, why don't you come and experience the customs of various places? Hearing Xingju say this, Lu Lin was suddenly a little moved. If nothing else, Xingju's words are still very attractive, and Lu Lin is indeed a little moved. Beckoning to Tony, Lurin told Tony about their plans. Tony had no problem with this. He wished he could see more alien technology. Being a bounty hunter is naturally undesirable. After they got the information, Lu Lin and his party left with large bags of things blackmailed from Shandar Star, traded. This time they can be regarded as a shotgun for a cannon. After all, what they got is a military spaceship, and no matter how powerful the weapons of those interstellar pirates are, the gap is still not small compared with the military spacecraft of this top civilization. After Tony's modification, the spaceship is even cooler and more powerful. The people of Shandar Star have been watching Tony leave with cannibalistic eyes, because with the help of Star-Lord, Tony has taken away many of the top secrets of Shandar Star. Originally, these things would not be open to outsiders for a lifetime, but now, with Lu Lin around, they can only obediently comply. They were originally unwilling to give it, but after learning what happened in the Kree Empire, they didn't even dare to put a fart, and obediently handed over their technology. Star-Lord, who left Shandar Star, looked very excited and couldn't help but scream strangely. It's so cool for him, it's never been so cool. A spaceship with good performance is no different from a beloved wife for someone like Star-Lord. They brought 2 spaceships from Shandar Star, but there were only 3 of them, and it was really troublesome to drive 2 spaceships. So Tony simply modified the 2 spaceships and spliced them together. This is also thanks to Tony's recent breakthroughs and additions in nanotechnology. Speaking of which, we have to mention the top experimental terminal that Tony brought out from Shandar Star. This terminal can meet more than 99.9% of Tony's experimental needs. As long as the raw materials are enough, Tony can make all the products he needs on it. With the blessing of Tony's nanotechnology, the 2 spacecraft are seamlessly integrated without any traces of splicing. If necessary, the 2 spaceships can also be separated into 2 separate individuals in an instant and driven separately. Tony also wrote an AI program for the spaceship behind, allowing it to fly autonomously when no one controls it, and even attack enemies. This is divine, Star-Lord cheered. It's too powerful, it's too awesome, you're a god. Xingju couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Can I hire you as an engineer in my team? Although I am the only one in the team now, believe me, our team will grow soon. The vice captain is okay, Xingju said excitedly. With you, the galaxy is so big, where can't we go? I have to say, you have a lot of ideas. Lu Lin looked at Star-Lord's happy face and pierced his illusion. Remind you, Tony is the richest man in the world on Earth. What, the richest man in the world? Star-Lord's mouth was open enough to stuff a light bulb in. Although Tony is only the richest man in the world on Earth, Star-Lord will not look down on him for this. Because he knows that the person who can stand on the top of a planet will definitely not be a simple person. At this time, Xingju suddenly felt how ridiculous his proposal just now was. Hey, I mean, Star-Lord began to explain awkwardly, that, it is. Tony took a glass of pale green liquid from the spaceship and took a sip. This is a drink that is a specialty of Shandar Star, and before leaving, they brought a lot of it from Shandar Star. While this drink has a fruity aroma, the taste is more like thick yogurt. At the same time, this drink can also quickly replenish energy, with a completely free side effect of refreshing effect. Therefore, this drink is very popular among the stars. For Tony, who needs to stay up late for a long time to conduct research, this drink is undoubtedly a great energy supplement. But just as it works, in the universe, its high price also makes this drink a proper enjoyment for the rich. Tony smiled slightly, and threw a bottle of drink in his hand. Although I can't be your engineer, before leaving, I can help you transform the spaceship. Xingju took the drink and raised his eyebrows. I may understand the gold content of the richest man in the world. Every engineer is an extremely precious species in the universe, especially the kind that can improve the spacecraft, and it is a rare species among the precious species. The price of this kind of person once is not something that a person like Star-Lord can afford. Most of them are still self-taught, and they modify it indiscriminately, so they can move anyway. But the harmonious atmosphere between the two was quickly interrupted, because Tony really couldn't stand Star-Lord's taste. What kind of rubbish are you listening to? I'll give you something exciting. For Tony, the so-called golden songs of the last century that Star-Lord admired are all old-fashioned things, which are really too old-fashioned. Tony's finger tapped a few times on the ship's control screen, and the sound of powerful music instantly sounded inside the spaceship. What kind of mess is this? Xingju rolled his eyes and reached out to tune his music back. Mine is the most timeless classic. Yours is rubbish. What age are you, an old antique? Why are you still listening to these things? Tony rolled his eyes, he snapped his fingers, and the music inside the spaceship instantly changed to what he liked. What? Wait, I'm not yet 30 this year. Star-Lord shouted, watch your words. What? 30 years old? Tony also looked at Star-Lord in shock. Wait, what year were you born? I was born in 80, how, is there a problem? Star-Lord rolled his eyes and said. Waterfa. Tony looked at Star-Lord. You're actually 10 years younger than me. I thought you were 10 years older than me. Tony, who was born in 70, is now a middle-aged man in his 40s, but he still looks as if he is still in his 20s and 30s. But compared to it, Xingju looks like a middle-aged man in his 30s and 40s. You're 10 years older than me. Xingju was also shocked. You're not joking, are you? This is completely invisible. Tony glanced sympathetically at Star-Lord. You old antiques of the last century, I don't have a good evaluation. Although you are 10 years younger than me, in my eyes, you are still an old man who can't keep up with the times. Your taste, Tony sighed, the disdain in his words self-evident. What do you mean? But at this time, Star-Lord reacted something wrong. What? Wait, when? His fingers tapped heavily on the screen, only to find that there was no way to switch between the music. Star-Lord looked at Tony, who was enjoying himself. When did you invade my spaceship? Just now. Tony snapped his fingers and said lightly, the spaceship's system is too easy to crack. I didn't hold back, and I unlocked it. Don't worry, I didn't move anything except the music. Tony said with a faint smile. Xingju hammered the dashboard of the spaceship in an atmospheric manner. You guy. Give me back my hit songs. Tony pouted, shrugged, and smiled as he watched Star-Lord be inept and furious. This incident is just a small episode, and after the group travels through the universe, they are separated again. Tony and Lurin have been out for a month, and Tony got the technology he wanted. Lu Lin also had a good time outside, and the two were ready to go home. Before going back, the two of them still invited Star-Lord again, but Star-Lord shook his head and refused. In fact, as early as a long time ago, he had secretly returned to Earth once in a spaceship. But after returning to the Earth has long been different. The relatives he was familiar with, his family, had long since ceased to exist. The disheartened Star-Lord returned to the universe and continued to follow Yongdu. On the one hand, he had nowhere to go. On the other hand, it is also because he does not want to cause trouble with the Earth. Star-Lord knew that if he hid on Earth, Courage would definitely find him by any means. He didn't want to bring trouble to his former hometown, even if it had become a sad place for him. After breaking away from Brave's men, Star-Lord now just wants to be a free bounty hunter in the universe. As for the family, it was something that he had abandoned long ago. He doesn't need these useless emotions. After hearing Xingju say this, Lu Lin didn't speak, but just patted him on the shoulder. Star-Lord is still young and has experienced less, and in a few years, when he and his companions have established a bond, when he knows the truth of what happened, Star-Lord's mind will change. Lu Lin had no intention of telling Star-Ju the truth now. That would be meaningless, and it might not be a good thing for Star-Lord. Let's leave it all to time. After the two parties separated, Tony and Luren soon returned to Earth. As soon as he returned to Earth, Tony couldn't wait to dive into the lab and digest the research results he brought this time. At the same time, Fury found Lulin. What are you coming to me for? Lu Lin looked at Fury helplessly. Can't you let me stop for 2 days? I would like to invite you to join us. Fury looked at Lu Lin seriously. He didn't come up with this attention with a bang on his head, it was something he had been planning for a long time. That's right, this is the Avengers Squad, Fury's superhero team. He had invited Tony before, but Tony had declined. After getting along with Lu Lin for so long, Fury now also trusts Lu Lin very much. Many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are not even as trustworthy as Lu Lin in Fury's mind. It was not because Lu Lin helped S.H.I.E.L.D. several times, nor because Lu Lin provided a lot of precious information to S.H.I.E.L.D. This trust is based on the analysis of Lu Lin's behavior, on dozens of reports given by psychological experts in behavioral analysis. After a lot of evaluation, Fury was willing to believe Lu Lin. Originally, he did not plan to invite Lu Lin to join so early, because the time had not yet come. As if she wouldn't join in inviting Tony now, Fury felt he needed to wait for the right time to bring it up. But now, Fury has faintly sensed that there is a force hidden in the dark. He didn't know what that force was, or who controlled it, but the only thing Fury knew for sure was that an inner ghost had appeared in S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury was a suspicious man. Now he could hardly trust anyone, so he found Lu Lin and desperately wanted Lu Lin to join them. Join you? What, are you kidding? Lu Lin glanced at Fury. Join you guys and be used by those stupid piggy politicians on your planet? Sorry, I don't have such a weird fetish. Don't worry, this squad was established in secret, and no one knows except me, and you can guarantee that those people will not dictate your actions. Fury looked at Lu Lin seriously. Don't play these word games with me. Lu Lin said lightly. I can indeed not listen to the command of those politicians, but I want to listen to your command, right? Who gave you the illusion that you thought you could master me? Lu Lin narrowed his eyes slightly and said. No, you misunderstood me. Fury quickly explained. You definitely have the highest authority with me, and I will give you the greatest trust. Any of your actions don't need to be reported to me. Sorry, I'm not interested in your family-like superhero tricks. Lu Lin refused without hesitation. Can you tell me why? Fury stared at Lu Lin and said. No, why? Because I know the rabble too well. Lu Lin glanced at Fury. I don't want to be bound by the rules of the earth, nor do I want to be kidnapped by your moral standards. What does that mean? Fury's eyes narrowed slightly, and he thought of something bad. You know, the universe is actually very cruel. Lu Lin said lightly. Don't say dozens of lives, that is, hundreds of thousands, millions and tens of millions, put in the scale of the universe, it is not worth mentioning. There are too many civilizations, billions of lives, and they disappear inexplicably, unknown to anyone. Under this dark law, the order of the law of the jungle is derived. There is no doubt that as the Prince of Asgard, I am at the top of this order. You know what? As the Prince of Asgard, I am free to judge any Asgardian citizen, so can you understand the concept of king? In Asgard, Odin is the one, supreme king, and you can understand him as your ancient king. Oh no, your king here doesn't have that much power. To put it simply, under the royal family, everyone is the king's slave, the king's servant, and needs to serve the king's existence. Lu Lin mercilessly told the reality in the universe nakedly. What you see now is nothing more than the illusion that Odin is showing his kindness. You don't think that when Odin conquered the 9 realms, he relied on love and peace, right? Lu Lin scoffed. More people died at his hands than all life on Earth combined. And, remind you, the strength of the Asgardians is constantly changing with age. Even if I lie still, thousands of years later, I will still be able to become a figure like my father, which is the honor of the royal bloodline. And under this, you. Lu Lin pointed to Fury, and then pointed outside. Even everyone outside, in my eyes, are just ants. Lu Lin gently turned the wine glass in his hand and said, even if I go out now and slaughter the entire people of New York City, what can you do? You dare. Fury looked at Lu Lin coldly. At that time, I will take revenge on you at all costs. I'm sorry, but your so-called revenge is as powerless in my eyes as a baby's threat. What are you taking revenge on us? Lu Lin chuckled. Take your so-called nuclear bomb. Lu Lin snapped his fingers. In order to avoid your misperception of the strength of strength, let's show you a video. This is what happened when Tony and I played in the universe this time. Lu Lin pushed a communicator in front of Fury. Fury took a deep breath and turned on the video inside the communicator. That's exactly the scene that Tony recorded. Lu Lin wiped out the entire Shandar star fleet with one punch. Looking at the rain of fire, Fury was silent. Your technology, including the technology of 99% of people in this universe, can only be regarded as a large toy in my eyes. Lu Lin had never told them these things before, but when Lu Lin confessed, Fury faintly regretted it. I regret how I put such a killing god on Earth. I don't believe no one on Earth can stop you. Fury said with difficulty. Even if there is only one person left, we will take the wildest revenge on those who killed our compatriots. Peace of mind, don't be so excited. Lu Lin smiled lightly. Telling you so much is not telling you that I really plan to do this. Rejoice, Odin is old and has long been uninterested in conquest, and my brother is a brainless fool. As long as you use a little means, he will never leave the earth. As for me, I'm too lazy to do so many big things, fighting and killing all day. Aren't you tired? You should be glad that I still have a sense of so-called justice in my heart, and a trace of moral bottom line, so I will help the Earthlings and help you people for free. All I want is some trivial money and enjoyment. Lu Lin said lightly. Let me tell you what would happen if I became an Earth superhero and a member of your squad. If it really comes that day, in case there is any crisis on the Earth, of course I will come to the rescue. In that case, I will also become the superhero you call and be worshipped by the Earthlings. Looks pretty, doesn't it? But herein lies the problem. Superheroes are not so good, and there are a lot of anti-Sapienifists in the crowd. You absolutely can't imagine what these people are really thinking. Even in 2022, there are still a large number of people who believe that the Earth is flat, the circle of the Earth is false, and some people believe that the moon landing is a lie. Although Lu Lin is powerful, he can't save everyone. Once he does not do well, in front of the public, these shortcomings will be infinitely magnified. Those who want to gain attention and make money will try to discredit him. Why? Because only by smearing superheroes will they highlight their own difference and win attention. Under the leadership of unscrupulous media, there will inevitably be many people who are hostile, and even think that those enemies are brought about by superheroes like Lu Lin. There is no need to doubt the possibility of such a thing. Look at Spider-Man, who has been fighting in the city. How many people are clamoring to arrest him? Living examples are laid out in front of you. Lu Lin is not Spider-Man's abusive gas bag. What kind of joke? He let the good prince of Asgard go wrong, ran to Earth to do chivalry, save your lives, and in the end he will be insulted by you. What is the truth of this? It is difficult for Lu Lin to guarantee that he will not be angry and attack these so-called internet keyboard warriors and trolls. A superhero who will slaughter a person who speaks ill of himself, is that still a superhero? Lu Lin said lazily. So from the beginning, you don't expect anything from me. You know, if I don't know, forget it, but if someone really scolds me to my face, I will really make a move. Therefore, as long as I am on Earth for a day, you better manage the public opinion. Lu Lin smiled lightly. I'm a person who can't stand grievances. Fury felt a deep burst of anger, but also powerlessness. Because he couldn't do anything, he didn't even have the ability to drive Lu Lin off Earth. Oh yes, you may have some friends in the universe or something. Lu Lin said softly. You don't have to expect these people to be my opponents. The Kree Empire. Lu Lin looked at Fury's face and smiled. Judging by your expression, you should have heard of it. Unfortunately, I've also heard some things about Captain Marvel, who is supposed to belong to the Kree Empire. But it's a pity, it is estimated that you will not be able to contact this woman for a while. What did you do to Carol? Fury looked shocked. Well, you should know that the Kree Empire does not have a good reputation in the universe. The Kree Empire is very powerful, but they are an enterprising empire. High emotional intelligence, forge ahead. Low emotional intelligence, constantly waging wars of aggression. More than half of the wars between empires in the universe were provoked by the Kree Empire. Thousands of years ago, they even landed on Earth to conduct inhuman biological experiments on Earth. Until now, there are still many tales on Earth where they have left biological experiments. The people on the moon are also the result of their genetic experiments. Although Carol is an Earthling, she was born in the Kree Empire, and naturally has a friendship for the Kree Empire in her heart. So when Lulin destroyed the fleet of the Kree Empire, Carol appeared without accident. Since he wanted to stop himself from destroying the fleet of the Kree Empire, then of course Lulin would not show mercy to his subordinates and beat Carol fiercely. That guy hasn't been around for a year and a half, I'm afraid he won't be able to fully recover. It was so long that half of that time was spent beating Carol. If it hadn't been for Carol, Lulin would have been able to complete the mission within an hour. I'm still on the side of justice. Lulin smiled lightly. What I do is much more righteous than the defenders of justice in the universe. Fury was silent. Maybe he shouldn't have come to Lulin today, let alone pinned his hopes on Lulin. Look what scares you. Lulin laughed loudly. Don't care so much, as long as I live comfortably, generally speaking, I won't make a move on the Earthlings. But since you really lack enough trusted manpower, why don't you try to go to the North Pole and find it? There may be people out there who you want. The Arctic, ice sheet. Fury's eyes froze, and he instantly thought of a character. You mean, Captain, who knows? Lulin said lazily. After all, he is a superhuman, and he is still alive now, which is really a normal thing, right? Fury took a deep look at Lulin. Why do you know so much about things on Earth? Since you are a member of the Nine Realms, as a lord, it is quite normal to know a little more about the affairs of your own territory, right? After all, you are the only one in the Nine Realms who has escaped Asgard's control. Said Lulin meaningfully. Fury took a deep look at Lulin and got up to leave. He couldn't tell which of Lulin's words was true and which were false. But the only thing he can be sure of is that he is okay and absolutely cannot easily provoke the man in front of him. Fury felt that he had better do what he asked, and that he had better not disobey Lulin's will until he had the strength to fight Lulin. As for the Captain America thing, he was going to try it too. Try it? What if what Lulin said is true? If the captain were really alive, Fury's burden would be much easier. That's someone you can absolutely trust. Come out, I found you a long time ago. Lulin stretched his waist and said, I'm tired after eavesdropping outside for so long. Lulin opened the curtains, opened the window, and glanced at Tony floating outside. Why, aren't you going to come in and talk to me? Tony flew in, not consciously eavesdropping. What you just said is true. Which ones? Lulin said lightly. I said too much. It's about massacres, accusations of those things, and you really go on a killing spree for some accusations. Lulin did not answer Tony's question. So Tony, suppose there is such a situation, whether it is aliens or some evil and crazy scientist. In short, there is a madman who makes a big deal, and after that, while you eliminate this madman, you accidentally affect ordinary people. Even if it doesn't affect ordinary people, because of your ability limitations, you can't save everyone. There must be casualties in this, right? This, Tony hesitated, what do you mean? Don't think it's impossible, Lulin said lightly. Look at the things that Octavius and Connors made up. If they hadn't come at me, think about how many innocent people would have died. This time there is no private person, which is a blessing in misfortune, but what if next time someone wants to take revenge on me and affect ordinary people? Do you think these people will blame me for the deaths of their relatives and friends? As long as you appear in public enough times, things like this are bound to happen. In addition, there are those news and reports about the media that Lulin mentioned earlier. Those who want to attract attention and want to make money will try to discredit him in order to gain attention. Under the leadership of unscrupulous media, there will inevitably be many people who are hostile, and even think that those enemies are brought about by superheroes like Lulin. And after that, have you since become discouraged and stopped doing chivalry? Or are you going to ignore it? Lulin spread out his hands and said, sorry, I don't have the habit of spit on myself. Of course I won't really kill people, but if it really annoys me, I don't necessarily guarantee that I will do something. Lulin said lightly, you know, I have always ignored the statements of those stupid rabble. But what if the rabble is guided? I won't do it to ordinary people, doesn't mean I won't do it to those who hide in the shadows. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you still need to ask me about? Lulin couldn't help but feel a little funny. Look at what kind of people are in the US government. What can't those people do? Lulin glanced at Tony. You should know this better than me, right? Lulin smiled and turned on the TV, which showed the news of the military's attempt to force Tony to hand over Iron Man's armor. Look at what they're doing now, and look at what they've done before. Lulin said lightly, to tell you a cold knowledge, since the founding of the United States for more than 200 years, only a short period of more than 10 years has nothing to do with the war. And this is less than 1/10 of the history of the United States. What kind of politicians do you expect them to cultivate in such a country? Tony, you're an earthling, I'm not. Lulin said lightly, you can be forced by them to hand over the armor, and you can go to court with them. But if it were me instead, someone wanted me to hand over my magic, my power, I would just fly in front of him and screw his head off as a ball. So, in order to avoid some unrealistic illusions for some people, it is better to get vaccinated first. If these disgusting creatures really try to get something out of me, Lulin smiled lightly, maybe they will have a lot of common language in hell. Hell is real, and these people don't go to heaven when they die. They don't even get God's forgiveness. Do you expect me to forgive them? Hell, heaven. Tony believed the alien claims, but he still didn't believe much about hell heaven. That brine egg didn't look for you before, you can ask him. Lulin said lightly, I first came to Earth to kick Mephisto and his mentally handicapped son back to hell. What's the name of that agent next to Fury, Coulson? He watched me kick them back one by one. Maybe you can go to him and ask for confirmation. Lulin glanced at the TV and then looked up at the time and date on the clock. Oh, it seems like it's time for the trial. Why don't you go to participate? Tony looked at Lulin, slowly closed his mask, turned and flew out. Little fool. Come back and fix my glass. Lulin looked at Tony's departing back and said cursingly. Watching the live news broadcast on TV, seeing Tony killing all sides at the court meeting, hitting the military in the face and exposing their old bottoms, Lulin smiled slightly. All this Tony did was just a senseless struggle. As long as he still identifies with his identity as American, as long as he is still American, he is destined to not escape the country's rule system. He will compromise after all. Didn't he also hand over the Patriots later? Although it is impossible to crack Tony's technology, the United States has gained face, and the mark armor of the Patriot handed over by Tony is also very practical, which is enough. As long as Tony handed over the armor, then their purpose had been achieved. There are also opportunities and means to target Tony. It's just that they may not have imagined that in the next few years, their life will become more and more difficult, until Thanos snaps his fingers and everything becomes meaningless. Tony, who slapped the military hard in the face, did not have a better time, because the military did not actually give up Tony's mark armor. On the other hand, Tony also found himself with palladium poisoning. In this case, he only needs to find Lulin, and Lulin's fingers snap his fingers to help him detoxify. But Tony didn't set out to do that. Since the last time he heard Lulin and Fury's conversation, Tony's attitude towards Lulin has changed a lot. He hadn't seen Lulin in a while. Lulin didn't care. If Tony really had to cut ties with him because of this, then Lulin felt that there was no need for him to meet Tony again. Sooner or later both of them will become enemies, won't they? At the same time, Steve slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the familiar arrangement around him, in a trance, he seemed to see Peggy. Looking closely, I found that it was just another woman who looked very similar to Peggy. Hearing the sound of a ball game on the TV, Steve slowly sat up. Who are you? Why are you here? Where am I? Good morning, Captain, the woman said with a smile, and he glanced at the time, or should I say, good afternoon. Steve looked at the agent in front of him. Where am I? You're in the rehab ward in New York City. Where the hell am I? Rogers was starting to get a little angry. He suspects that he has fallen into the trap of the enemy, but he is not sure whether he is in front of him or allies. I'm afraid I can't understand what you mean, Captain Rogers. This game, Rogers said suddenly. What? I was on the scene at the game. It was in May 1941, because I was there. The female agent quietly pressed the siren in her hand, and two men with guns instantly pushed open the door and walked in. However, the next second, the two agents were sent flying out, and Steve ran out to find out that it was just a makeshift studio. In the overhead radio, the alarm is repeated. Rogers did not hesitate in the slightest and rushed straight out. But when he came to the street, a dazed mood suddenly came to his heart. Here it is, where? Soldier, please calm down. Fury, wearing an eye patch, appeared in front of Steve. I'm sorry about this show. I just wanted you to get used to it. Get used to what? Steve looked at his surroundings a little confused. I'm sorry, Captain, you have been sleeping deeply, almost 70 years have passed. 70 year. A huge feeling of powerlessness instantly pierced Steve's heart, and at this moment, he only felt a pang of heartache and could hardly breathe. Captain, what's wrong? Fury looked at Steve, a little strange. It's nothing. Steve was a little dazed. I still owe someone a date. After waking up, Steve began to slowly contact modern life and began to slowly learn to accept new things. At the same time, due to the impact of Llewellyn's presence on Fury, the Insight Plan entered the final stage ahead of schedule. The so-called Insight Plan is to analyze human beings around the world through big data analysis and artificial intelligence. By analyzing their behavior patterns, we can determine who is likely to become criminals in the future. In this way, all criminal activities are completely eliminated before the crime is committed. This plan was supposed to be completely completed in 2014, which in turn became the trigger for the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D. But now, thanks to Llewellyn's early appearance, Fury has seen the threat from outer space years in advance. Originally, Fury was hesitant about this plan, although the space carrier that executed the Insight Plan was already being built. But whether to implement the Insight Plan, Fury is still considering. But after seeing the alien threat and being intimidated by Llewellyn, Fury finally made up his mind in advance. He decided to really start executing the Insight program. The problems inside the Earth must be solved, and all human beings must unite in order to face the possible threats of the future. So Fury didn't hesitate to start the Insight project. According to the original plan, the space carrier will be launched around 2014. But with Fury's full support, the construction of the space carrier far exceeded Hydra's expectations. In order to make the Insight Plan go smoothly, Hydra did not care about exposure and accelerated the pace of the plan. Originally, Project Insight was indeed based on analyzing their behavior patterns to determine who might become criminals in the future. But after being changed by Hydra, Project Insight became to eliminate everyone who was a threat to Hydra. That's what Hydra really planned. But because Fury changed his mind early, Hydra also had to follow Fury's pace to avoid unexpected problems in the plan. But it was precisely because they were forced to disrupt the original plan, which made Fury aware of the problems within S.H.I.E.L.D. At the same time that the construction of 3 aerospace aircraft carriers is nearing the end of the S.H.I.E.L.D. base, Steve has also adapted to modern life. After a review by S.H.I.E.L.D., Steve finally meets Peggy Carter. Steve, you still owe me a dance. At this time, Paige was already terminally ill, and even suffered from Alzheimer's, and her daily life was even inseparable from a ventilator. Even so, she remembered Steve. Steve's eyes filled with tears. Sorry, I'm late, I'm really sorry. In Steve's arms, Paige closed her eyes safely. She created S.H.I.E.L.D., and in those days, it wasn't easy for a woman to do that, you know, those people. Steve interrupted the white man's explanation. You don't need to say any more, I know, I can understand that she is married and has children. Steve looked at the woman on the hospital bed tenderly, his eyes full of tenderness. It's a matter of course, I don't think there's anything wrong. You don't need to explain it for her, and she doesn't have to explain it to me. Looking at Paige who left safely, Steve finally chose to let go and slowly left. Since God gave him a chance to start over, he would naturally cherish his life. He wanted to take a good look at this country, at the world, and at whether the peaceful world they had fought for with their lives was the same as he imagined. Since Paige is the founder of S.H.I.E.L.D., at Fury's invitation, Steve also joined S.H.I.E.L.D. and became an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Since this is Paige's work, let him take a good look at what kind of organization S.H.I.E.L.D. is. But before that, he needs to have a place to live. Arriving at the accommodation arranged for him by S.H.I.E.L.D., Steve accidentally meets a girl named Sharon. There seemed to be sparks rubbing out between the two, and I don't know why, Steve always felt that Sharon gave him a Paige feeling. Sometimes looking at Sharon's face and looking at her back, Steve always felt that the woman in front of him seemed to be the gorgeous Paige decades ago. However, Sharon is actually an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. At the same time, she is also the niece of Peggy Carter, which is why Steve can always see Paige's shadow in Sharon. Gradually, Steve has begun to integrate into the new society, and at this time, he also performs several tasks assigned to him by Fury. These counterterrorism missions are not difficult at all for a super soldier who once crawled out of a pile of dead people. During the mission, he also got to know himself, Black Widow. Steve feels good about Black Widow. After all, they were comrades in the same camp. Even if the two sides have never met. Just when Steve thought his life would go on like this, a mission changed him completely. Say, what is the mission this time? This is the document. Coulson handed the document in his hand to Steve. Remember to destroy it after you read it. Looking at the sweaty Coulson who rushed over, Steve casually handed him a can of Coke. Take a drink and take a break. Coulson took the Coke and put it in his pocket. I need to make sure that you have read the mission request and destroy it completely. Steve nodded. He could understand this kind of thing. At a glance, Coulson, Steve only treated him as if he was dedicated and so laid back when he wasn't working. But how did he know that Coulson was actually a big fan of himself? Coulson doesn't drink it not because of dedication, but because he plans to take this can of Coke home and treasure it for the rest of his life. After reading the paper file, Steve destroyed it completely under Coulson's supervision. But after Coulson left, he couldn't help but feel a little puzzled, because the mission was filled with a strange aura from beginning to end. This is a rescue mission. But at the same time, he needs to protect Natasha for another task. Fury didn't tell him what Natasha's mission was, but the soldier's keen instincts made Steve feel that something was wrong. But he is only a military man, and the only thing he needs to think about is to obey orders. So he wouldn't question Fury's order. But in the process of carrying out the mission, Steve found that the mission was not the same as he imagined. Natasha is actually copying confidential information from S.H.I.E.L.D. Steve begins to become suspicious of his companion, but Natasha tells him to ask Fury directly. Under Steve's pressure, Fury finally admitted the existence of Project Insight. This caused Steve to be extremely dissatisfied. Do you know what's going on now? Fury looked at Steve angrily. I can understand your thoughts, which is why I am hiding your actions, but you should not dictate my actions. Fury said coldly. You have also met Lu Lin with me, you have even fought with him, you should understand what such a person means to the Earth. You should know that there are many people in the universe who can threaten the Earth. That's right, because the captain joined S.H.I.E.L.D., he was qualified to see a lot of intelligence and information. Lu Lin's intelligence was also within his ear's purview. Fury even took Steve to Lu Lin's bar. Lu Lin and Steve get along very well. Steve will come to his bar for a drink when he is not busy, and then talk to Lu Lin about things in the universe. Lu Lin is not stingy, but whenever Steve asks, he will give answers, including the situation in the universe and the threats he faces. Steve actually has a sense of crisis in his heart. But that doesn't mean Steve agrees with Fury's approach. He only felt that Fury was too extreme, and if he continued to act like this, there would definitely be a big problem. After leaving S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Steve came to Luren's bar again. Only this time, he looked a little sullen. But he couldn't tell Lu Lin about these things yet, even if Lu Lin was also a consulting agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Lu Lin could see Steve's sullenness, but since he didn't speak, he definitely couldn't say it. Lu Lin naturally did not make himself bored and went to inquire. When Steve returned to his residence, he was suddenly attacked. Only then did he finally learn that his neighbor was also from S.H.I.E.L.D. Even the girl who vaguely had a good impression of himself was also an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the most unacceptable thing for him was that this girl was actually Paige's niece. This made Steve feel a pang of anger. But now is not the time to think about these things at all, because there is news from the other side. Fury was stabbed to death. The situation took a turn for the worse, and the only thing Steve could trust now was Natasha. How did you hide your head and tail today? It's not like you, Captain. Can you spot that it's me? The captain took off his hat, revealing his resolute face. The captain glanced at the urgent news broadcast on the TV not far away, and smiled bitterly. You know, now I am a wanted criminal. Police and agents throughout New York are now searching for Steve's tracks. Since the resurrection of Steve is still a secret, Fury has not disclosed it. Therefore, even if Steve now tells everyone that he is Captain America, he will definitely not commit treason, and no one will believe him. As for Steve's face, everyone didn't care very much. Who cares what a wanted criminal looks like? After all, Steve wore a mask when he was on mission in World War II, so not many people know Steve's true appearance. Ha, Captain America treason. Lu Lin frowned, and then said, Say, what's going on? A bad feeling arose in his heart. Shouldn't this be the plot of Team America 2? After this incident, S.H.I.E.L.D. was completely disbanded. And Hydra was also picked out and completely turned underground. If according to the previous situation, after S.H.I.E.L.D. is finished, who will deal with the upcoming Zetori Legion after that? The butterfly effect has far exceeded Lu Lin's expectations. Now, Steve has woken up early, and the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 has been completely destroyed by himself. Aisha was abducted by herself, and the warlock Adam who could have appeared disappeared. If S.H.I.E.L.D. is finished at this time, even the plot of Avengers 1 will be greatly changed. After all, Loki is still honestly playing pranks in Asgard. Lu Lin didn't care much about these things. As long as Thanos didn't get all the Infinity Stones, he didn't worry about what Thanos would turn over. What Lu Lin was worried about was Ji Yi. In his heart, Ji Yi is much more dangerous than Thanos. If Ji Yi was ready to expel himself because of these changes, or even planned to do it to himself, it would be a big trouble. Hydra, it's Hydra, the captain said with difficulty. I thought they had been wiped out, but I didn't expect that not only were they fine, but they eroded S.H.I.E.L.D. from top to bottom. So you came because you wanted me to help you? Lu Lin glanced at Steve. No, I'm just here to tell you, if it's not for the point that the matter is absolutely unsolvable, don't interfere. Why? Now it was Lu Lin's turn to wonder. Hydra intends to execute the Insight Plan. Steve said, you may not know about the Insight Plan, then the captain spoke out about Hydra's plan. Once the plan succeeds, tens of millions of innocent people will be killed in an instant. But I'm going to stop them. Steve looked at Lu Lin and said, I know that my strength alone is very small, and this time I go, there is a high probability of failure, so I hope that you can stop Hydra after I fail. Why? Lu Lin asked, shouldn't it be more trouble-free for me to strike now? Because this is a matter for the Earthlings, this is a matter for me and Hydra, and I must personally solve it. Then why would you put your last hope on me? Lu Lin said lightly. After all, I am not your Earthling, and these things have nothing to do with me. No, it's about you. Steve smiled and said, because I checked, you are also on Hydra's kill list. So if the plan succeeds, you'll be attacked too. Really? Lu Lin looked at Steve and said lightly, but I don't believe it, I don't believe that your reason will be so simple, naive. Steve looked at Lu Lin and finally smiled bitterly helplessly. Well, I really can't hide it from you. Because they infiltrated a lot of people, many people. Steve said helplessly. I can't even be sure that there are a few of those politicians who are not them. Before exposing their plans, they will unite with those politicians and stigmatize all those who try to stop them as criminals. Steve pointed to himself. I'm a good example. Steve hesitated. Fury told me about you, so I think it's better not to involve you unless you have to. You mean I threatened Fury, right? Lu Lin said with a faint smile. Steve looked embarrassed. He didn't expect Lu Lin to be so informal, and directly said the word threat. In that case, then I promise you. Lu Lin smiled faintly. After all, you haven't asked me for anything. As a friend, I'm willing to do you a favor. Lu Lin was so enthusiastic, naturally not because of such a simple reason. It's because he received a task from the system, and he plans to sign in for those famous scenes. Although the plot has changed a lot, and what could have happened will not happen, Lulin's intuition tells him that he will definitely gain something by going this time. The mission is to stop Hydra's plan, complete the task at the same time, but also check in, kill two birds with one stone. Lulin naturally had no reason to refuse. Thank you. Steve glanced at Lulin, then put on his hat and turned to leave. In addition to the reasons just mentioned, Steve didn't want Lulin to make a move. Just imagine, why was Hydra able to hide in S.H.I.E.L.D. for so many years without being discovered? What did those people do? Many of Hydra are absolute war criminals, people who absolutely need to be executed on the spot. But why did these people survive? Have you changed your identity and continued to engage in research? Even the previous director of S.H.I.E.L.D. was the leader of Hydra. Among them, the US government must have played a very disgraceful role in it. Those who cooperate with Hydra must know what kind of existence Hydra is, but they don't care, and neither do the counselors. Politicians and even the military don't care. They only care about their own interests. After all, mustaches have been dead for so many years. Hydra, it's just a dog who lost his family. What can they do? But now, Hydra is about to rule the world, and it is the people who don't care about anything that caused this tragedy. It is even possible that they will continue their privileged life and continue to maintain their status as human beings. Steve couldn't accept that his beloved homeland would do such a thing, and he couldn't accept that the top of his beloved homeland was such a group of people. It's not so much that Steve intends to deal with these people himself, but that he already has the will to die. The beloved woman has died, and the beloved motherland has become like this, completely deteriorated. He is just a soldier, he can't do anything, he is now even a wanted criminal. Ha, wanted criminal, how ridiculous. Steve thought to himself and slowly walked out the door of the bar. Perhaps, dying on the way to the mission is his best destination. Steve glanced back at Lurin. At least Lulin is here, Hydra's plan will not succeed, right? Looking at the back of the captain leaving, Lulin fell into deep thought. Steve is the perfect American man. He represents all the good qualities of this country, and he really does what those politicians say they do. Even, in the entire Marvel universe, Steve is the only person who has been recognized by Mjolnir. And as for the later female Thor, that cannot be counted. After all, people or related households, can that be the same? Idle is idle, why don't you have some fun for yourself? Lulin smiled slightly and followed Steve to the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. The captain prepares to infiltrate the headquarters and stop Hydra from launching the space carrier. Lulin came to S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters first. Under normal circumstances, Lulin would definitely not be able to walk in directly like that. But now the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. is in chaos, the people of Hydra, the people of Fury, and the orders between them are in conflict with each other. People on both sides are purging dissidents, and Steve has sneaked into the headquarters at this time, ready to make a big fuss. Therefore, the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. at this time was extremely chaotic. Lulin easily sneaked into the depths of S.H.I.E.L.D., and here, he also witnessed the classic elevator fight. I can play all day, Steve said with a slight gasp. The famous scene was successfully signed. Lulin smiled slightly, and then came to Pierce's office, quietly waiting for the arrival of the captain. Steve didn't make Lurin wait too long. When Steve felt, Pierce was dreaming of a bright future with a group of politicians. After consulting with Fury, Steve and Fury decided to publish all the information. All the information here includes all the secrets of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all the secrets of Hydra. Now that the situation is urgent, there is simply no time to distinguish which ones are S.H.I.E.L.D. and which are Hydra's. What's more, even without these things, Fury has no way to tell the truth of this information and who it belongs to. Therefore, he simply used hacking methods directly to publish all information on the internet, so that Hydra could never hide from now on. But the price was the complete demise of S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, many things that S.H.I.E.L.D. has done, if placed in the eyes of the public, will definitely not be accepted. Steve was the only one who carried out this task. And Ada Natasha. At this time, Steve did not know the Falcon, and Coulson was just a scumbag, more like a civilian than an agent. There is combat effectiveness, but not much, therefore, his presence is almost negligible. After releasing all the information, Steve had to single-handedly prevent the launch of the space carrier. It is simply too late to time, or even simply publish all the information, which is extremely difficult. Steve should have stopped the launch of the space carrier first, and if he could not prevent the launch, he only needed to destroy the core on each space carrier responsible for controlling the operation of Zola's algorithm. After solving the core of the algorithm, the Insight plan cannot be implemented normally. But Steve calculated in his mind and found that he alone could never accomplish these two things. So he intends to publish all the information first. After that, he will do his best to convince those staff in S.H.I.E.L.D. who are still in the dark and do not know the truth. Only if they work together will it be possible to stop the launch of the space carrier. With Natasha's cooperation, Steve successfully obtained Pierce's identity verification and published all the information. "Steve, you're treason," a general from the military cursed angrily. S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military have a deep level of cooperation, and it just so happens that neither of them is a clean-assed person. Once this information is worked on, many unsavory things in the military will also be published. Especially those insider trading. Once it is publicized, I am afraid that many people in the military will finish the calf. Steve didn't answer, but turned on the full radio. "I'm Steve Rogers, yes, Captain America, Steve Rogers. Some of you may know that I exist, but I am not dead, but I have been frozen in the Arctic for 70 years, and I have only recently seen the light of day. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. Listen carefully to what I say next." Everyone's expressions froze when Steve spoke out about Hydra's existence and their plans. At the same time, with the help of Coulson, Steve's face also appeared on major TV stations in the United States. Everyone knew that Steve wasn't dead, he wasn't, but they also knew about Hydra's existence and what they were going to do. In an instant, the entire United States, and even the whole world, became a mess. Groove, really fake. What's going on? Is he really Captain America? The information he said can really be found on the internet. Waterfa, so much. In the room, those who were kept in the dark immediately reacted and wanted to start resisting. But in the next second, a team of agents rushed in, without any hesitation, and directly shot and killed everyone in the house. Steve and Natasha saw that the situation was not good and immediately fled. "You could have enjoyed the last 30 minutes of your life," Pierce lamented, "but now it's a pity. The notice goes down, the plan is advanced, and the space carrier starts half an hour early." In the launch center, after listening to Steve's story, many employees went on strike. But at Hydra's gunpoint, they were still forced to continue the work they were doing. In just a few minutes, the space carrier was ready and was about to start launching. The original plan was to launch 3 space carriers, but that was the plan 4 years later. Because Fury temporarily changed his mind and rushed to the schedule, the 3 space carriers originally planned became 1. Regardless of this, 1 is not perfect for Hydra, but it is enough. Around the corner, Pierce and Steve bump into. Seeing Steve, Pierce did not hesitate at all, and directly let people do it. He knew that he would never be able to enlist a character like Steve. However, since most of the manpower was sent out to maintain order and ensure the launch of the space carrier, Pierce did not have any available manpower. He thought 3 elite squads would be enough to deal with Steve. But he underestimated the super soldiers, and he underestimated Steve. These people did not even hold out for 5 minutes under the captain. Pierce began to panic. Facing Steve one-on-one, he had absolutely no chance of escape. If Steve had taken control of him and threatened his life, it's hard to say what would have turned out. But soon, Pierce calmed down. "You don't dare to do anything to me, you can't even threaten me," Pierce said confidently. "Even if you threaten to kill me, I won't let the Insight plan stop. Give up, join Hydra now, and I may still have a place for you in the new world. I will never compromise with you," Steve said lightly. "Maybe we can gamble to see who can't support it first." He looked at Pierce with some malice. "You are so old, you can't support it for too long." At this moment, a sentence came from behind Pierce, "Long live the Hydra." Turning around, Pierce turned out to be Lulin standing behind him. "You are, what do you mean?" Steve looked at Lulin stunned. "You too, Hydra people?" Not to mention the captain, even Pierce himself was confused. "It turns out that the Prince of Asgard is our man." "Why would he be our man? How could he be our man? But if he wasn't our man, why would he say such a thing as 'Long live Hydra'?" Pierce couldn't be sure if Lu Lin was his own person, because there were many factions within Hydra, and Pierce didn't know what the other factions were doing. But this did not prevent a burst of ecstasy in his heart. Long live Hydra, Pierce responded. Very good, now you keep me safe, and then kill Steve, and when the matter is done, I promise not to treat you badly. Pierce didn't say a word, and as soon as Lu Lin raised his hand, Pierce instantly turned into flying ash. What's the situation? Steve felt like his CPU was about to burn. First, Lu Lin inexplicably said long live Hydra, and then he killed Pierce. So is he a Hydra person or not? Lu Lin looked at Steve. Do you have any last words? What the hell is going on? Steve looked at Lu Lin desperately. What the hell are you? It's very simple. Hydra is my subordinate, and I am the true leader of Hydra. Lu Lin said lightly. After 500 years, Midgard will finally return to the rule of Asgard again. Fury has always maintained contact with Steve, and after hearing the news, he is also confused. Walter Hare. How is this possible? If it's really what Lu Lin said, then what else are they working on? Just sit down and wait to die. Ironically, Steve had tried to use Lu Lin as a last resort. Now it seems that he was just a joke from beginning to end. It's too late to regret now. Lu Lin smiled and said, is it bad to be a citizen of Asgard? Do you know how many people in the universe can't get this honor? I will never betray my own ethnic group, I will not betray my country. Steve clenched the shield in his hand. Even if it is death, I will never give in. Well said, I appreciate you. Lu Lin smiled faintly. It's a pity that from today onwards, you will disappear into this world forever. Looking at Lu Lin walking towards him, Steve suddenly laughed. What are you laughing at? Lu Lin looked at Steve with interest and asked puzzled. I suddenly realized that if you were really Lu Lin, with your strength, with Asgard's strength, you probably don't need to use these means at all, right? Yes, Lu Lin smiled lightly. Maybe there are some irresistible factors that make us make this plan. No, I still believe my speculation. Steve slowly straightened up. Either you are not Lu Lin at all, or your identity as the so-called Prince of Asgard is made up. Are you so sure of your guess? Whether this is the case, you will find out as soon as you try. Saying that, Steve decided to strike first, but the next second, a strong sense of crisis made him block the shield in front of him. The captain's shield claims to be able to absorb all kinetic energy, but it is not. He is only able to absorb most of the oncoming kinetic energy when he is head-on. This protects the user to the greatest extent and ensures that the user will not be harmed by external forces. However, just after the punch came down, Steve felt that he even heard the mournful cry of the shield. Even though the shield was able to absorb most of the kinetic energy, Steve was still punched out. Because this punch not only has physical kinetic energy, but also carries Lu Lin's divine power. Strong as Steve, after breaking 2 cement pillars in succession, he lay on the ground and completely lost the ability to resist. Steve felt his vision blurred, but he didn't pass out. He also wanted to stand up with willpower. After all, now is the time when the United States needs him. How can he fall at this time? Willpower is a very mysterious thing. He can support people to do some weird things. Even if they are seriously injured, even if they seem to have no power to resist, with willpower, humans can do many things far beyond imagination. Even if Steve is a super soldier, even if he is a super soldier, he needs to follow the most basic rules. At this time, all the nerves and related bodily functions in his body had been completely destroyed by Lu Lin. Therefore, even if he has strong willpower, he cannot really stand up and resist. Steve couldn't even feel his body anymore, and he couldn't even move anywhere else except his neck now. Looking at Lu Lin, who was slowly walking towards him, Steve's seriousness showed a hint of despair. If he still had a fluke mentality in his heart before, but now, all his previous speculations have been overturned. If the Lu Lin in front of him was fake, then he would definitely not be able to completely make him unable to resist with just one punch. So Lu Lin must be the real Lu Lin, which is his original strength. If Lu Lin was just teasing him, how could he be so ruthless? Even if he can recover, he will become a waste person in the future and will never be able to stand up again. He sensed that his spine had been damaged, and he was afraid that he would only become a waste person in the second half of his life. Ha, 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 Steve gasped, trying to get himself to look directly at Lurin. What are you laughing at? Lu Lin frowned. It's really ridiculous. I always believed in you so much before, but I didn't expect it, Steve said helplessly. Didn't expect anything, Lu Lin said lightly. Didn't you think I would really make a move on you? I'm curious, why are you working so hard and so hard? Obviously you can have a better life, you deserve better treatment. Because, I love this country, I love the land that gave birth to me and raised me. Steve laughed. No matter when, I will always say no to aggression, I will always fight for it. Yes, Lu Lin smiled faintly. Maybe it's the captain, you went to bed too early, woke up too late, and you don't know many things. You don't like to surf the internet either, at most you just read the newspaper, so you don't know a lot of things. Not only you, but even many people in the United States now don't know these things. Lu Lin crouched in front of Steve and said slowly. Let me tell you what the US government did after the end of World War II. You already know all the results of Hydra's research and the scientists who should have been executed, imprisoned. Look at the mess here now, this is ironclad evidence, right? It's a normal thing. Steve closed his eyes. After all, those people were completely finished, but they were just some scientists, who would have thought that they still had this ability. Science, no borders. That's right, Lu Lin said lightly. Science has no borders, but scientists have nationality and have their own political positions, shouldn't you know this? Then you know, they gathered these people, what are these scientists for? Lu Lin smiled lightly. It is to deal with that red country in the east. Oh yes, Fury probably thinks you've just woken up and aren't ready to touch these things. I heard you just heard about the history of the 60s, right? So do you know about the Cold War? Do you know that in the 50s, under the leadership of the United States, the West launched another war of aggression against the East? Then do you know, in the 70s, and the Vietnam War? This is actually also a war of aggression. No, Steve opened his eyes and stared at Lu Lin deadly. If you don't believe it, you can try to ask Fury, as an agent from the United States, presumably he knows a lot more than you do. Otherwise, why do you think Fury never wanted to trust the government, never wanted to trust any politician? Fury, is that so? Steve asked coldly. In order to ensure that the communication is timely enough, the communication between the two sides has not been interrupted. In the headset, Fury, who had been giving Steve encouragement, suddenly fell silent. Answer me, Fury. Chapter 71. Yes, Captain, for you, many things you still don't know as well. Politics is dirty. Yes, that's right, politics is dirty, but that's not a reason for you to invade others. Lu Lin said lightly. If you can invade others for such ridiculous reasons as interests, then conversely, when your strength is not as good as others, the aggression of others against you is also deserved, right? Fury was silent. Listen, Steve, don't be fooled by him. Fury said. Every country has its own history that cannot be looked back on, and it also has its own shortcomings. But you have to believe that our country is getting better, believe that we can make this world a better place. Better, Lu Lin chuckled. You are talking about forcing Tony to hand over his armor. Or human experiments on super soldiers with soldiers. It's not that war era, but countless soldiers still die under human experiments every year, just for the serum of the ethereal super soldier. Oh yes, Steve, you may not know Dr. Banner, but if I have the opportunity in the future, I can introduce you two to each other. Gee, Dr. Banner is miserable, he is just a harmless scientist who is not harmful to humans and animals, and as a result, he will become an angry monster from time to time because of experimental accidents. Guess how the military treated this monster? Lu Lin laughed. They actually want to capture this monster and reproduce the same monster for military warfare. Steve Rogers, the country you love so much is not what you think it is. Lu Lin said lightly. So, what other reason do you have to desperately? I'll try to make him better. Steve said with difficulty, but it seems that I have no chance to do this. You know what? Instead of tinkering with an old house, tear it down and rebuild. Lu Lin smiled and said, you should probably know about the change of dynasty. As long as the people of this land are still there, as long as the culture and spiritual inheritance are still there, what does it matter if there is a different leadership? Even if even the name of the country has changed, as long as the core remains unchanged and the spirit is inconvenient, does this country still exist differently? The government is not good to use, but it is better to change to a government that works well. Lu Lin said lightly. So many guys with vegetarian meals, when will you finish dealing with them? Huge interest groups are entangled, you can never get rid of them, the best way is to eliminate them all, and then cultivate a new batch. Fury said anxiously. What he said is all nonsense. Although he didn't know what Lu Lin's purpose was in saying this, the meaning revealed in his words was already obvious. Lu Lin really tricked Steve into overthrowing the US government, and he wanted to plunge the United States into division and turmoil. Why are you telling me this? Steve looked at Lu Lin stunned. See the world with your eyes, don't stay in the cocoon of information compiled for you by others. Open your eyes. Steve suddenly laughed. Then you can strike now, right? If you don't make a move, the space carrier can really start attacking. Or have you solved the problem of space carriers? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Lu Lin glanced at Steve suspiciously. Steve didn't say anything, just smiled, a smile on his lips, and just kept staring at Lu Lin. In the end, Lu Lin finally sighed helplessly. How did you see it? Steve realized that he was actually conscious, and he immediately got up from the ground. Just now, Lu Lin just used magic to limit his movement, not really a punch. Steve hit him until he couldn't take care of himself. It's just that Lu Lin's punch just now is indeed a little light and heavy, and Steve feels that his back is still very painful. Because if you were really a Hydra person, the space carrier would have already completed its task a long time ago, and it would not have dragged on until now. You told me for so long, the space carrier still did not launch the action, it means that you have actually solved the space carrier, right? Lu Lin smashed the bar and smashed his mouth. You found it. Immediately, he snapped his fingers, and Steve's afterlife found that the scenery outside had changed greatly, and he turned to look and found that he didn't know when the space carrier outside had already fallen into the sea. The InSight program was not launched, and there were hardly any casualties this time. Only the space carrier that S.H.I.E.L.D. built with great effort and great cost was completely destroyed. Steve even saw that someone was already rowing a boat, trying to run over to find something useful to take back for collection or sell for money. What? When? Fury on the other side was also stunned. It turned out that he had been kept in the dark, and he didn't know when the space carrier had been wiped out by Lu Lin. What you just said, all true? Steve asked suddenly. Lu Lin glanced at the headphones on Steve's ear, and Steve took them off, threw them on the ground, and stomped on them fiercely. You can look for all kinds of materials, or ask a university professor who specializes in history. Lu Lin said lightly. Of course, since these people may not be accurate because of their positions and so on, you can also go to the east. Go and ask the people and soldiers of the invaded countries what they think, and ask those people what they think of the United States. To see, hear, and understand for yourself will surely convince you more than I told you. You, why know so much? Steve looked at Lu Lin blankly. Because I am God, as a god, I know a little more, isn't it normal and reasonable? Then why did you let me know this? Steve wondered. I can't think of your purpose for doing this. Because it's fun. Lu Lin said of course. Fun, Steve repeated. Yes, fun, just like now. Lu Lin took out his mobile phone and showed the material he had secretly photographed just now in front of Steve. Look, how interesting these expressions are. Steve only glanced at it, his face suddenly darkened. He didn't dare to imagine that this was actually his expression just now. I can only say that the young man is good Yanni, good Yanni. Lu Lin sighed. Do you know what meme is? The so-called meme is actually what people in China often call memes. I don't know, you can roughly understand it as a picture to express your mood, such as this, as. He spoke. Lu Lin made a series of US Team Limited memes. Despair, disappointment, joy, madness. Wow, these are rare materials. After posting them on the internet, they will definitely be warmly welcomed by everyone. This is the out-of-print expression of the American team. How rare. Deleted, Steve said with a dark face. Deleted. Lu Lin was suddenly happy. Why do you say delete it? Do you know how much effort I put into this photo? At this time, Fury finally brought someone over. After letting people deal with the remnants of Hydra, he immediately rushed over, ready to see what was going on with the captain and Lulin. As soon as he arrived, Fury saw Steve looking at Lulin with a dark face. What's going on? As soon as Fury looked up, he also saw the emoji in Lulin's hand, and he was immediately stunned. This is, asked Fury cautiously. If you want what I have, you can't pay a price. Lulin smiled and said, so, what price are you going to pay for this set of photos? Lend me money, I'm going to buy pictures. Steve turned to look at Fury and gritted his teeth. Not long after Steve woke up, he didn't have a penny on him, and he didn't know where his inheritance had been lost. Now all of Steve's expenses are reimbursed by S.H.I.E.L.D. If you put it before, how much money Fury will not blink. But the problem is that just now, in order to deal with Hydra, they released all the information together. Not to mention the funding, now everyone is cutting with them. Fury can now only use his own small vault to reimburse Steve. How much do you want? Steve looked at Lurin. One price, 800,000. Why don't you grab it? Fury suddenly broke his mouth and cursed, 800,000. How many photos? You're afraid you're crazy about money. Out of print photos, I gave you a discount for this little money. Lulin said dissatisfied. Believe it or not, I take it out, don't say 800,000, 8 million will be bought. Fury had no doubt about how faceless those people were. Steve just thought it was a meme and didn't want to show it to others. But the problem is, you can't stop others from having ideas. If someone buys the photo and asks to meet Steve, can Steve not go in order to destroy the photo? The point is that this is the end, and then it's really over. If some organization wants to deal with Steve or wants the virus serum on him, forget it. Just follow the vine and directly kill them all. If you buy the photo, Steve's fanatic fan and suitor, or even the kind who wants to take Steve home for the night. Let Steve go by himself, that is, meat buns beat dogs, there is no return. Of course, Fury is not unable to take out the 800,000. After all, over the years, he also has a lot of savings. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he can also take public funds to reimburse and occasionally embezzle a little money to expand his team. But the problem is, you borrowed this money, or you won't come back. The captain is not a rich man, lend him 800,000, when will Fury get this money back? Besides, could he really ask the captain for this money? No thick-skinned person can do this. Yesterday, Fury would not hesitate at all, because he could go directly to the public account and reimburse it and it would be over. But after today's events, making such a big fuss, whether S.H.I.E.L.D. exists in the future will have to be said separately. Where will he reimburse this money? You won't and can't get this money, will you? Lulin looked at Fury with some amusement. It's ridiculous that the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. can't even get 800,000 US dollars. Lulin laughed and said, do you believe it, Steve? I don't believe it anyway, I just feel that he is unwilling to help you. What many people don't know is that as a 70-year-old man who returned from the last century, Steve actually has his own idol baggage. Steve, who is more concerned about his own image, naturally can't bear this kind of thing about his black photos. Fury. Steve finally couldn't take it anymore. Sorry, Captain, I really can't help you. Fury said stiffly. It's just a few photos left and right, it doesn't matter. And it's not that I'm not willing to help you, it's because S.H.I.E.L.D. is almost gone. Where can I get you this money? It's okay, don't worry, once these photos appear on the internet, I will immediately let people deal with them and claim that these pictures are fake. Wow, is this American freedom? Lulin smiled slightly. Look, what I said before is really right. Besides, do you really think people will care if this picture is real or not? It looks like you, and that's enough. Lulin said lightly. They don't care if this is the real American team. This, Fury knew that he was no longer fit to stay here, and quickly left with his men. I'm relieved to see you're okay, Captain. Fury said in a loud voice. Don't worry, when I finish dealing with the matter of S.H.I.E.L.D., I will definitely help you solve this matter. I'm so sorry, Steve. Lulin said insincerely. 1 yard to 1 yard, although the relationship between us is good, but this business matter. Steve sighed. Why did he spread such a bunch of people? At a critical time, not even a single one that can come in handy. At this time, Steve's thoughts were all gray, and he even had a vague desire to return to the ice. After decades of not seeing, the world has changed too fast, and it has actually made him a little unrecognizable. Looking at Steve's big black face, Lulin smiled and turned to leave. Steve was a very interesting man, and Lurin's plans were more than that. In his previous life, Lulin was happy to see Steve shout out the phrase "Long live Hydra." Steve in this time and space seems to have no chance. After all, with the existence of Lulin, whether Thanos can snap that finger is another matter. But that doesn't mean Lulin doesn't have a chance at all. If Lulin is willing, maybe Steve still has a chance to become Captain Hydra. After all, Hydra is not completely finished, but the Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D. is finished. The so-called cut off one head, and two more, secretly, I don't know how many Hydra people are still alive. When you have a chance, you can naturally try the bold idea in his heart. After leaving, Lulin did not know that his unintentional behavior actually planted a seed in Steve's heart. Although this was also his original purpose, he did not expect that the effect would be so good, and the germination of Steve's thoughts had begun at this time. After returning to Steve, he immediately began to make up history, all kinds of things related to the United States, unrelated. He tries to observe it from an objective and truthful perspective. In order to find these things, he even learned how to surf the internet and learn how to find information on the internet. As he deepened his understanding of history, Steve's understanding of the United States became deeper, and his patriotism quietly changed. Change of dynasty, what? A small seed sprouts quietly in Steve's heart, and in time, it will grow into a towering tree. When Tony got up sleepily, he looked at everything in front of him and was stunned. Waterfa, what happened? Am I blinded? Looking at the huge broken battleship floating in the sea in the distance, Steve's whole body froze. Hey Lulin, can you tell me what happened? Well, it's a long story. Lulin shrugged. Simply put, you can understand that Hydra has revived. After a moment of silence, Tony threw his hands out, and then what's the situation? What happened? Lulin had no choice but to tell the story and the ins and outs of the matter. You mean, my father was one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. Lulin nodded. That's right, that's it. If you're interested in those, why not search the internet yourself? Now all kinds of information have flown all over the sky. All the media is interpreting the so-called classified documents. I'm already watching. If there is anything Fury regrets the most in this life, it is undoubtedly the decision to die with Hydra. He already knew that Lulin would make a move. What kind of effort did he have? He shouldn't have pretended to die either. Wouldn't it be good to find Lulin the first time he was attacked and ask him to solve everything? What to engage in suspended animation, what fishing law enforcement, now well, get things out. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. is about to end with Hydra. The point is that Hydra can also hide underground and start terrorist activities instead. But what about them? They're UN-funded secret services, and they can't do anything. Even, they have to take responsibility for this incident and give an explanation to the people. These things added together, making Fury's head almost explode. Generally speaking, such a big thing happened, the Department of S.H.I.E.L.D. was designated not to exist. But I don't know how Fury persuaded the Council gang to successfully renew the life of S.H.I.E.L.D. As a result, S.H.I.E.L.D. was able to survive, but at the cost of being constrained by regulation in all respects, and no longer having the freedom it had before. Fury said he could understand this. After all, something as big as Hydra happened, and it was natural to receive more supervision. But the problem is that now that many actions are subject to regulation, and many actions are no longer allowed, the things in Fury's plan are difficult to implement. This made him eager to form a squad of his own. The Avengers plan was brought up by him again. Fury naturally found the captain first, and in his heart Steve was the heart of the team. Without Steve, the entire Avengers squad would immediately fall apart, and it would be impossible to pull together. But when Fury found Steve, Steve refused Fury's invitation without hesitation. I need a while to rest and get acquainted with the world. Steve said lightly. I'm going to go out and see the world by myself. Get out for a walk. Where are you going? Fury looked at Steve dumbfounded. Are you alone? Fury is still waiting for Steve to come forward and stand up for S.H.I.E.L.D. Without Steve, I'm afraid that S.H.I.E.L.D. will finish the calf soon. Don't underestimate the appeal and influence of the symbols of an era. Once Steve comes forward, many of the situations facing S.H.I.E.L.D. will be solved. Seeing that Steve was determined to go, Fury had no choice but to play the emotional card. Paige, once Fury said the word Paige, Steve knew he would never be able to refuse Fury's request. It's just that Fury also knows that these two people must not say too much, and after the relationship is consumed, Steve will never help again. After convincing Steve to stay a few more days, Fury breathed a sigh of relief and found Llewellyn and Tony. When Fury arrives at Llewellyn's bar, Llewellyn is chatting with Tony about S.H.I.E.L.D. matters. So that's what happened. Tony looked solemn. There is no need to worry. Once their leader is solved, all that remains is 3 or 2 big cats and kittens, and there is no need to worry at all. The only caveat is that without restrictions, they may develop in more extreme directions, some small branches, and may even become terrorists. Tony touched his chest lightly and nodded slightly. What are you doing here? Llewellyn glanced at Fury at the door. Fury walked in and came up with his own idea. I said, I won't join S.H.I.E.L.D. Llewellyn said lightly. I know the current predicament of S.H.I.E.L.D. I didn't join when you were extremely free before, and now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been regulated like this, do you still expect me to join? Llewellyn refused Fury without hesitation. That's how I have that attitude. Tony said lazily. I'm still busy fighting lawsuits with the Lords of Congress, and I don't have time now. Maybe after handing over your armor, or after I die, you can invite my successor to join you. As for now, no talk. With that, Tony staggered away. Walk slowly, don't send it. Llewellyn glanced at Fury and said lightly. Do you really stop thinking about it? Fury remained undying, and then asked, if you join us, Tony will definitely agree to my request. What conditions do you need? Just open your mouth. Yes, Llewellyn smiled faintly. Then how about you hand over the cosmic cube to me? Cosmic cube. Fury's eyes froze. How did you know about this thing? How fresh. Llewellyn smiled and said, why can't I know that the cosmic cube is in your hands? Not only that, but I also know what the cosmic cube is. Llewellyn said lightly, this thing is not something you can grasp at all. I advise you to hand it over as soon as possible, otherwise something irreparable will happen then, but don't blame me for not reminding you. Fury didn't speak, and after drinking the last sip of ice water in his hand, he turned to leave. You haven't paid yet. Llewellyn did not forget to remind Fury. $10, thank you for your patronage. How much? $10. Why don't you grab it? It's already cheap. Llewellyn said lightly. Now everyone outside thinks that there is about to be a war, everyone is stockpiling things, and a bottle of mineral water outside has risen to $30. Capitalists, Hydra. Fury scolded and paid the money, turned away in a huff. He noticed that something wasn't quite right with Tony, so he prepared to ask someone to investigate what had happened to Tony. Since you can't convince Llewellyn, you might as well try to convince Tony. If Tony could add his squad, maybe things would be fine after that. After all, if Tony spoke, Llewellyn would not refuse. As for cosmic magic, he had no intention of handing it over. After seeing so many dangers, Fury began to feel that it was necessary to develop powerful weapons. But according to the current speed of development of Earth science and technology, I am afraid that there will not be any major breakthroughs in another 10 years. But the problem is that time is running out for Earth now. Today is Hydra, what is tomorrow? What will happen in the future? There had already been an alien invasion decades ago, and if it happened again, Fury would not be able to solve it. Do you expect that Captain Marvel who wanders the universe all day long? In the final analysis, the Earthlings still need to be able to protect their own strength. The Insight plan failed, and Fury could only pin all his hopes on the cosmic cube. As for Tony's Mark armor, Fury didn't beat his idea, but this idea was just a thought after all. Tony couldn't move, and if he wanted to convince him to hand over Mark armor, Fury might as well think about how to convince Llewellyn to join S.H.I.E.L.D. At the very least, there is a glimmer of possibility. It's okay to have Tony help S.H.I.E.L.D. develop some conventional weapons. But those things weren't what Fury wanted at all. What he needs now is a powerful weapon that can set the stage for victory. Although these people were very difficult to deal with, Fury thought of another person who seemed to be persuaded. That's the Hulk, Dr. Banner. He didn't have that much thought. He didn't have so many thoughts. As long as he was given generous conditions and promised to release his wanted warrant, presumably Dr. Banner would still be very willing to join S.H.I.E.L.D. The only problem is that the Hulk after Banner's transformation is not so easy to control. In case something goes wrong with the Hulk, let alone annihilate the enemy, I am afraid that my own people will be pinched to death by the Hulk first. But the strength of the Hulk is undoubtedly strong, and Fury even feels that if there is a Hulk, then the matter of Hydra in the first 2 days cannot even be solved by Lulin's hand. It can only be said that there are gains and losses, and if you get a strong combat power, you must endure the shortcomings of this combat power. Hearing that Banner had recently been studying Yoga Buddhism and something like that in the East, Natasha contacted her. After all, it is a big beauty, which has its own advantages, and if she comes out, the success rate may be much higher. But before that, she had to figure out what happened to Tony. According to Tony's nature, it is probably not difficult for Natasha to disguise herself and infiltrate Stark's company to become his secretary. It is estimated that soon Natasha will be able to figure out what happened to Tony. While Fury was arranging everything, Stark's residence, Pepper looked at Tony with an unreasonable expression. "Tony, what the hell do you think?" Little Pepper was speechless. "How did you give me such an important position?" Without Pepper's knowledge, Tony appointed him CEO of Stark Industries. From then on, although Tony was nominally controlled by Stark Industries, after that, Stark Industries had the final say. It was not Tony, but her little Pepper. "You made such a big decision, why didn't you tell me?" Pepper asked a little angrily. "Because I'm the boss and you're an employee." Tony glanced at Pepper and said lightly. Pepper was stunned suddenly. Tony's words were somewhat ruthless. Saying such ruthless words at such a time is difficult for ordinary people to bear. But after all, Pepper has worked by Tony's side for so many years as a secretary, and she can be said to know Tony's personality and habits well. Although Tony has changed a lot now, it is difficult to change his nature, and Pepper can still see at a glance that Tony has something on his mind. "What's wrong? What happened to you?" Pepper was a little flustered. Thinking back to what Tony has done lately, Pepper always has a bad premonition. Good question, what can I be on my mind?" Tony looked away and looked down at the tool in his hand. "I'm just back to where I was before." Tony smiled slightly. "So many things have happened, I want to give myself a vacation and make myself easier, can't I?" Seeing Tony like this, Pepper was even more sure that Tony must have something hidden in his heart, but refused to say it. Thinking of what Tony had done before, a bad premonition rose in Pepper's heart. "Aren't you supposed to be explaining what happened? What happened to you?" Seeing Pepper like this, Tony suddenly panicked. He never expected that Pepper would actually guess his mind all of a sudden. "How can it be an explanation? You don't overthink it, absolutely not." Tony explained repeatedly. "I'm just a little tired, really, definitely not lying to you." Seeing Tony's panicked look, Pepper was even more sure of his guess. "Tell me honestly, what happened? Why have you already started entrusting the aftermath?" Pepper asked with some teary eyes. "I really don't have anything at all, I swear." Tony swore by the gamble. "Really, you believe me, absolutely nothing happened to me." "What is the aftermath? Are you cursing me to die quickly?" Pepper broke into a smile and gave Tony a blank look. "How could I expect you to die?" She pulled out a tissue and wiped her tears. "Since you're okay, then I'm relieved. I can be CEO right now and help you with the company's affairs, but what you have to know is that I can't do it for long. You can be dashing for a while, but when the time comes, you have to come back." "Hey, you're an employee, I'm the boss, you can't order me that," Tony said with some dissatisfaction. "That's right, you're the boss, I'm the employee." Pepper looked at Tony dissatisfied. "I also have the right to resign at any time." "No, you won't. I'll do it, and if you make me upset, I'll quit at any time." Pepper responded. "It's not fair to me, why you can quit at any time." Tony spread his hands. "Well, now I announce, you've been fired." "Really?" Pepper laughed. "Really?" Tony nodded affirmatively. "Really? So I'll pack my things now and go." "That's not okay, you can't go." Tony stepped forward and took Pepper's hand. Pepper was suddenly stunned. She didn't expect Tony to actually do this, which caught her off guard. "I can't do without you, I need you, you know," Tony said softly. Pepper glanced up at Tony, and the two looked at each other, and at this moment, they collided with a spark. The faces of the two people got closer and closer, the closer they got closer. Seeing that he was about to kiss, Tony suddenly woke up. Oh, my alarm went off and I needed to deal with my lab equipment. Tony took a step back sharply and said a little confused. Ahem, yes, I need to sign the paperwork too. Pepper straightened her clothes. What, I'll go first, after all, I just became a CEO, I have a lot of things. After leaving Tony's room, Pepper took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. She didn't know what was going on today, and she didn't know why Tony stopped suddenly. But Tony's behavior today completely shattered the delicate balance between them. Seeing Pepper leave, Tony fell heavily on his sofa. In other words, he will definitely not be angry before, and he will choose to face his heart. But it's different now. Tony, who realized that his life was imminent, felt that it was better not to delay Pepper's future. If he and Pepper are together, what will Pepper do when he dies? How should she face her departure? Although both of them were almost putting their minds on the table, Tony was still reluctant to poke the layer of window paper. If he really broke the window paper, what kind of life would Pepper live after he died? Tony didn't want to think about it, and didn't dare to think about it. Instead of leaving Pepper with a memory that will last a lifetime, stop there. Although this will leave her with a regret, it is better than suddenly leaving after being together. Tony thought so, secretly making up his mind. After what happened today, Tony became more and more indulgent. But what he didn't know was that in a dilapidated slum thousands of miles away, a revenge plan against him was slowly unfolding. Thor, my good big brother, we haven't seen each other in a long time. You still have the face to say. Thor looked at Lulin resentfully. You have been in Midgard for so long, and you don't say go back to see me. Every time I go back, before I can find you, you leave again. Do you still have my big brother in your heart? Yes, there must be. Lulin said with a grin. It's just that you also know that I'm not conducting my own trial. So you see, I don't have a lot of time either. What is your trial, Odin? And Lurin told Thor that the reason for coming to Midgard was a trial, which prevented Thor from running to Midgard to find Lulin. Otherwise, according to Thor's character, I am afraid that he ran to Earth to find Lulin as soon as he knew that he had come to Midgard. And now, Thor has also ushered in his own trial. The so-called trial is to choose who will become the true successor of Asgard. The trials are divided into many levels, one after the other, until someone fails. In the end, see who has passed through more trials to become the next king of Asgard. Because the competition is who has passed the most levels, and everyone's trial is different, it doesn't matter who starts the trial first. This is not to say that those who start the trial first necessarily have an advantage. Of course, these are the contents of Odin and Lulin's fooling Thor, and in order not to let Loki see the clue, the two of them even tricked Loki together. What Thor didn't know was that the trial was real, but the choice of the king of Asgard in this way was false. Because Odin had already planned to let Lulin take his place when he died. This so-called trial is actually just to temper Thor's nature. If Thor can successfully pass the trial, then he knows the nature of the trial and does not really care. But if he doesn't pass the trial, then it doesn't matter if he knows it or not. You didn't pass the trial anyway. What is the nature of the trial, and what does it have to do with you? I can't tell you what my trials are, Lulin said quickly. Where he had any trials, it was actually just fooling Thor's words, so he quickly found a reason to fool the past. After all, we are competitors now. Thor was slightly stunned, and then laughed. You're right, we're competitors now. Since you don't tell me the content of your trial, then I can't tell you the content of my trial either. Thor smiled mysteriously. As you wish, Lulin said with a shrug. But when you first arrived, Midgard has changed a lot from hundreds of years ago. Do you need me to give you a little help? No need, Thor said confidently. I am the Grand Prince of Asgard. What can be hard to get me? You'll see. Thor laughed and said, although your trial started earlier than me, I will soon catch up with you, or even surpass you. You'll see. Looking at the appearance of Thor striding away, Lulin shook his head helplessly and said nothing. This guy probably only really hit a wall, he knows what to do. Thor looks confident on the surface, but in fact, he is very panicked now. Since being thrown to Midgard by the Rainbow Bridge, Thor has found that he has lost all his divine power. Now he is no different from the so-called mortals. These are still second, the key is his beloved hammer. Mjolnir is gone. She wasn't even willing to answer her call. This is what makes Thor most flustered. If Mjolnir no longer responds to his call, can he still be considered Thor? Can he still be considered the Grand Prince of Asgard? Thor wasn't sure, so he had to try to get a response from Mjolnir. But no matter what pose he posed, what slogans he shouted, and how much strength he used, Mjolnir did not respond to his call. Because of his loud yelling, Thor was even treated as a neuropathy for a time and was almost arrested by people in a psychiatric hospital. When Thor, who did not have a penny on him, found himself hungry, without hesitation, he walked to a roadside restaurant and gulped meat and drank. But when he tried to leave, he was stopped by the waiter. What? Pay? Thor said he didn't know what it meant to pay. So he was happily invited by the police to the police station for tea. Well, the process is not pleasant. Although Thor has lost all his divine power, his strong body is not something that any mortal can fight. After overturning 6 policemen in a row, Thor let out a cold snort of disdain. So this is my trial. It's also too easy. Thor was then directly stunned by a stun gun coming from behind. After arriving at the police station, Thor was interrogated, but the police thought that this guy was purely neurotic. What trials, what princes of Asgard, make people listen to it for a while. Fortunately, he wordlessly said Lulin's identity and address, and the police found Lulin's according to this information. When Lulin learned that Thor had been arrested at the police station for eating the Overlord meal, he was speechless. But he is his brother after all, and Lulin can only helplessly go and bail him back. What the hell are you doing? Lulin looked at Thor helplessly. How did you get yourself inside the police station? I'm a person, single-handedly, with the power of the flesh, 6 warriors. Thor said proudly. Well, have I proven my bravery? Have I passed the trial? Nope. Lulin shook his head and sighed. If you continue like this, your trial will soon fail, I am sure. Seeing that Thor didn't want to believe it, Lurin told him the common sense of life in Midgard. After learning that he was hitting the police, Thor opened his mouth. No wonder Lulin would say that his trial was about to fail, it turned out to be such a thing. After learning the news, Torton was depressed. When Lulin offered to help him with some funds, Thor refused without hesitation. I am the Grand Prince of Asgard, and I am your brother. What you can do, I can definitely do. Thor was very unconvinced. Don't underestimate my strength. Lin couldn't resist him, so he could only let him go. It's just that Lulin sent someone to secretly follow Thor, so as not to cause any more trouble. Thor's first day was miserable. Apart from being caught at the police station, he couldn't even find a place to sleep at night, so he spent the night in the park. A woman passing by the side of the road even mistook him for a homeless man and threw him a few bills. After waking up, Thor was immediately happy to see the banknote on his body, and he thought it was a lifelong gift, so he put the banknote away without hesitation and prepared it for a good drink. As an alcoholic, he hadn't drunk for a whole day, how could he stand it? The owner who sold the wine was not a fool, and seeing Thor's strange costume and sloppy appearance, he asked him to pay first to take the wine. The result was naturally unquestionable, and Thor was directly driven out. His little money, how can he buy wine and drink? After a whole day of running around, Thor finally understood what it was like to work in Midgard. However, it also exhausted Sif, who was sent out to spy on Thor. She really didn't understand why the same brothers, this person and man, is the gap between God and God so big? She was almost fed up with Thor's idiot. It actually took him a whole day to understand that living here costs money, and money needs to be earned by work. Although he was hungry for a day, Thor was very happy, because he felt that he had figured out what this trial was all about. He just needs to find a job tomorrow, have money, have a full stomach, be able to drink, and then go find his hammer, Mjolnir. Thor is now almost certain that Odin's test to give him is to find his own hammer. Because it is very difficult to find your hammer, everything in front of you is the difficulty of finding a hammer. But if Thor watches TV and follows the news, he'll find that there's a strange hammer in Mexico that no one can lift. Of course, Thor doesn't care about this, and naturally he doesn't watch the so-called TV news, he only immerses himself in his own world, fantasizing about passing the trial. The day after Thor regained his strength and was ready to find a job, he came up with another thing that made Lulin cry and laugh. Thor, this guy, was almost tricked into being an actor in the San Fernando Valley. What kind of place is San Fernando Valley? Perhaps many people have heard of his famous name. To put it simply, the San Fernando Valley is another Hollywood in the United States, but the films produced here are the kind that cannot be released in theaters. The actors who work here are generally affectionately called teachers by people on the other side of the ocean, and countless people have learned a considerable part of their physiological knowledge from here. For teenagers in the United States, the film shot here is the beginning of the first release of their youthful and restless hormones. If it weren't for Lulin's timely shot, I'm afraid Thor would have debuted as an adult movie star by now. All in all, Thor was heartbreaking. After several days of acclimatization, Thor finally understood how to live in Midgard, and he set off to find his hammer. Lulin, who really couldn't stand it, glanced at the news on TV to Thor. So he went alone, with nothing, to Mexico to find his hammer. Naturally, there is no need to mention what happened along the way, and Thor also knew the person he was destined to know. After finally sending Thor away, Lulin was thinking that he would be able to relax for a few days, but Tony came. In the past few days, Tony often runs to his side, and when he comes, he will say something nonsense, just like giving his last words. Of course Lulin knew what was going on, but Tony didn't speak, Fury didn't say anything, he was an outsider, what was he qualified to say? So he simply didn't say anything. While the two were chatting, Jarvis's voice suddenly sounded, "Mr. Hogan was affected by the terrorist attack and his life is in danger. I think you need to know this, sir." Hogan is Happy, one of Stark's most trusted people, and Happy is also Stark's driver and bodyguard. Although Tony may not need such a thing as a bodyguard at all. But Happy sees himself as a bodyguard, and Tony is happy to work with him in the play. To put it simply, in the entire Stark industry, except for Pepper, the person Tony trusts and is closest to is Happy. You can imagine how angry Tony was when he found out about Happy's accident. Who did it? Tony's entire face contorted in anger. Jarvis did not answer directly, but listed all similar terrorist attacks. According to calculations, there is an 83% chance that this terrorist attack is related to Hydra. Although there were many terrorist attacks at this time, it is not known what exactly happened. Officials don't even know what caused the explosions. One can only guess that this terrorist attack may be related to Hydra. Looking at the scene of the explosion, Tony only took a few seconds to see that this so-called terrorist attack was actually a suicide bomb. Fuck, these crazy people, Tony cursed. Tony got up and left the bar. Need my help? Lulin asked. It's my business, Lulin, don't you meddle. Tony refused Lulin's request for help without hesitation. Since your life is not long in coming, you might as well do something crazy. Tony came to Harpy's hospital room and glanced at the unconscious Harpy, and the anger in his heart was even worse. Out of the hospital, the reporters who came here were already waiting for Tony. Since becoming Iron Man, Tony has never liked to be interviewed by reporters. But today, he was unexpectedly interviewed by reporters. "Listen, you scum," Tony said angrily, "I don't care if you are Hydra or the Ten Rings Gang or some other messy terrorist organization. I don't care at all. You have provoked my head, and if this is the case, then I will definitely get rid of your rats in the gutter." Just then, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Stark, please watch this video." Tony took the reporter's cell phone, and a bearded man appeared on it, who announced that the Ten Rings were responsible for the terrorist attack. "The Ten Rings Gang, right?" Tony said lightly. "You can come to me at any time until I find you. My home is in XXX, come on, try it, see who will lose." On the other hand, Lulin has also been watching the news on TV. When he saw Tony directly report his home address, Lulin couldn't help but sigh. This guy actually hasn't learned his lesson. When Stark returned, Lulin said helplessly, "I think you'd better take it easy." "Am I going to be afraid of those guys?" Tony said unconvinced. "You know, it's a revenge." "Lulin, this is revenge, you don't interfere with my revenge." "Have you forgotten what I said earlier?" You at least think about Pepper, right? Lu Lin shrugged. If they really launch a terrorist attack on you, do you really think you can protect Pepper? Tony's face froze suddenly. You have to have confidence in my defenses, believe me, they have absolutely no way to get close to me. Yes, Lu Lin shrugged noncommittally. You don't believe it. Tony snorted coldly. Go, I'll show you the defense of my villa. I believe not. Lu Lin said helplessly. No, you have to come with me today. Lu Lin had no choice but to give it to Sif, got up and followed Tony to his villa with the sea view. Lu Lin glanced out the window and said with a faint smile, look, they are coming. What? Who's coming? At this moment, Pepper complained and walked in from outside the door. Tony, you don't know, the group of guys on the board. Tony was horrified to find that outside the window, 3 Warhawk helicopters were aiming at him. Tony could even see what the pilot of the helicopter looked like. It was a fierce bald head. He smirked and pressed the weapon launch button. In an instant, more than a dozen helicopter-mounted missiles were fired towards Tony's villa, and at the same time, their helicopters were also loaded with large-caliber machine guns and began to strafe Tony's villa. Lu Lin shrugged helplessly. This is probably the plot of Iron Man 3, and the person who attacked Tony here should be someone from the AIM company. Perhaps because of the change in plot, AIM and Hydra don't know how to hook up. Perhaps it was Hydra who gave AIM technical support, which led to the plot of Iron Man 3 happening early. When the plot of Iron Man 3 happened, Tony had already experienced the plot of Iron Man 2, evolved, and experienced the Battle of New York, and the sense of crisis made his strength improve a lot. He was able to deal with AIM, and of course, because he was too arrogant, he put himself in a quandary. But there's no denying that without those previous growths, Tony certainly wouldn't be an opponent for AIM. But now Lu Lin is not worried at all. Under his tutelage, Tony's strength is much stronger than in the original book. Therefore, he was not worried about whether something would happen to Tony at all. Pepper. Lu Lin, help me protect Pepper. Tony yelled. Lu Lin sighed, and with a wave of his big hand, a magic barrier appeared in front of Pepper. Oh, leave with her first. Lu Lin glanced at Tony. Also, are you sure you really don't need my help? Tony put on the armor. It's my business, Lu Lin, you don't have to meddle. My business. Lu Lin glanced at Tony and sighed helplessly. Tony's pressure does seem to be a little too high, and anyone who knows that he is about to die soon, the pressure will be very high. Give him a little room to release his stress. Lu Lin sighed and left with Pepper. In the next second, the ground shook, countless rubble fell down, and from the outside, the villa built on the edge of the cliff had slowly collapsed, and was about to sink into the sea. Inside the villa, although Tony was very embarrassed due to being caught off guard, he was not harmed. Fake fac. In the midst of a burst of curses, Tony jumped out of the ruins. Lu Lin looked at the embarrassed Tony, and mercilessly laughed. Everyone has finished their things and left. It seems that the defense of your villa is not very good, right? Lu Lin said lightly. Don't you really need help? Tony's face turned blue and white. Lu Lin was right, he was completely slapped in the face. But he didn't want to contradict Lu Lin, because if Lu Lin weren't there today, he wouldn't have dared to imagine what danger Pepper would have. First harpy, this time Pepper. The anger in Tony's heart was helpless to endure. Anyway, thank you. Don't chase. Those people will soon be out of sight. Lu Lin pointed to the helicopter that was about to disappear into the sky. Or are you going to give up? Tony glanced at the helicopter in the distance and said viciously, I will teach those people a real lesson. With that, Tony soared into the sky, just up and down when flying, crookedly. Obviously, in the battle just now, Tony's armor suffered a lot of damage, but in order to save face, Tony did not say it, nor did he wait until the repair was completed before setting off. Lu Lin couldn't help but burst out laughing. The shortcomings of this guy's face-loving love have not been changed. What the hell is going on? What happened? Tony won't be in danger, right? Pepper looked worriedly at Tony, who was far away. Do you know what happened to him lately? He's dying. What? A bunch of question marks popped up on Pepper's head. Didn't you notice that his palladium poisoning is very deep, and he needs to be relieved with drugs every day? What? How come? No, Pepper was on the verge of despair. What's the hurry? Isn't there still me? Lu Lin said with a faint smile. Don't worry, he'll be fine. This is the path of growth that he must go through. His life is big, but it is not so easy to die, and we will not watch him die. Hearing Lu Lin say this, Pepper finally calmed down. This guy has been hiding from me and not telling me. Pepper said angrily. I want to resign, I must resign. Don't worry, aren't we people also being hidden? Lu Lin said lightly. It's just that Tony didn't expect me to see it. Anyway, I still have to thank you. Pepper bowed. If it weren't for you taking care of Tony, I really don't know what to do. It doesn't hurt, Lu Lin said lightly. You'd better be careful in the past few days. Those people can't deal with Tony, they will turn around against you. Imagine if you've been in contact with any strange people lately, and it's best to stay away from them. Yes, Pepper thought thoughtfully, I'll pay attention. Tony ran after the men, leaving the rest to Pepper. In order to clean up Tony, Pepper also has to hold a press conference and deal with reporters. In short, she has a lot of things. Tony, please, I hope you don't let him have an accident. Don't worry, don't worry. Lu Lin waved his hand and left. I'll watch him. Although the plot has changed, Lu Lin feels that Tony's trip is still absolutely thrilling. Besides, aren't there still S.H.I.E.L.D. guys watching? Fury is now desperate to curry favor with Tony and let him be counted in the Avengers squad, so he will never let Tony have an accident. The most important thing is, isn't there still him? In case Tony's life is really in danger, as long as there is still a breath, Lu Lin can save it. In order to avoid S.H.I.E.L.D. not knowing about this, Lu Lin also called Fury by the way. Your chance has come. What opportunity came? Fury was a little puzzled. Tony's thing, Lu Lin said. He has been under a lot of pressure recently, and it is a good opportunity for you to make a move. If you wait a few more days, you probably won't be able to convince Tony to join your Avengers squad. Hearing Lu Lin say this, Fury suddenly became excited. He didn't even have time to say thank you, so he hurried to find a way to find Tony. Hanging up the phone, Lu Lin's eyes moved slightly. He received the task of the system. Originally, Lu Lin did not intend to interfere in Tony's grudges. In the final analysis, this is still Tony's own sin when he was young. But since the system has issued tasks, then embarrassed, in order to check in the number of lotteries, Lu Lin has to prepare to start attacking AIM. After thinking about it, he would definitely not be able to find the stronghold of AIM in the laboratory of those people on his own. So Lu Lin contacted Fury again and asked him to provide him with intelligence support. Fury was naturally very surprised when he received Lu Lin's call. He didn't expect that Lu Lin would come to help so enthusiastically this time, and even gave all the intelligence support to Lu Lin. You know, because of this terrorist attack, whether it is on the side of Congress or the side of the common sense, it has put a lot of pressure on him. In order to solve these things, Fury is almost worried to death. Now that Lu Lin took the initiative to send him to the door to say that he wanted to help, where did he disagree? So he directly gave all the information he had to Lu Lin, and allocated half of the agents in S.H.I.E.L.D. to Lu Lin. Lu Lin didn't expect Fury to be so supportive of herself, but this is good, it can save her a lot of effort and things. Texas. Tony, who was wearing short sleeves, sneezed widely. He wiped the snot on his face with his frozen fingers, glanced at the armor behind him that had already recognized the power, and sighed helplessly. Fack. Tony glanced around, but finally couldn't hold on. If this continues, he will freeze to death. During the battle just now, Tony's armor was hit, fell to the ground, and the communication module was completely damaged and almost impossible to repair. It's not that his defense is not good, the main thing is that he came out too hastily, there was not enough energy, and the parts of the armor were not even fully loaded. Not only that, but his energy circulation system also went wrong, which caused Tony's armor to completely become a pile of scrap iron. How is it an energy problem again? Tony cursed darkly. When will this energy problem be solved? Seeing that he was about to be unable to hold on, Tony could only helplessly try to seek Lu Lin's help. Lu Lin, are you there? Lu Lin, help me. In the cold wind, snowflakes fell, and Tony shouted into the sky like a fool. However, Tony waited for a full 10 minutes, and there was still silence around him, empty. Fack. Tony cursed secretly. Say what will help me, but you still didn't come when I needed it. What's the use of asking you? High in the air, Lu Lin looked at Tony, who was dragging the armor forward below, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He's a careful man, scolding me, right? I remember, it's not over. After glancing at the gas station and a farmhouse not far away, Lu Lin stopped looking at Tony and got up and left directly. He was going to eliminate the branch of AIM. The mission requirements given by the system are not very strict, as long as it can reduce the living power of AIM. On the other hand, after a difficult half-hour of walking, Tony finally found the human being. Hungry and cold, he planned to find a hotel to live in, but he never brought money with him, and the innkeeper naturally wouldn't let him stay. Not even if he says he's Iron Man. Fortunately, the boss saw that he was really pitiful and gave him a piece of clothing, which did not let him freeze to death on the street. Tony thought that with his face, he could at least brush his face to get some food and clothes, but everyone he met was wary of him. No one was willing to help him at all. Tony even felt that if he couldn't find clothes or food, he might be frozen to death. Desperate, he finally decided to spend the night in a thatched pile in a family's warehouse. Thatched piles are actually very warm and can bring a lot of warmth. Even if Tony knew that this was a trespass, he couldn't help it, it was too cold on the street. The 10 Rings Gang. Lurin. Fack. Tony scolded tremblingly. He planned to wait until his temperature had recovered a little and then get up to steal some clothes. At the current pace, if he didn't hurry up and find some clothes, I was afraid that he would freeze to death before he found those people. At this moment, the door of the warehouse was suddenly opened, and a little boy walked in. The little boy was instantly stunned. Harry's gaze wandered between Tony and Iron Man's armor, and he never dreamed that he would be able to meet his idol. As a child, he didn't have that much thought. What he saw and what he thought was what he thought. Seeing the armor of Tony and Iron Man, I naturally thought that Tony was Iron Man. Oh my God, are you just? Tony quickly put up a finger and put it in front of his mouth. Fortunately, this is just a child, and it can still be fooled. If it is an adult, I am afraid that I will directly pull out the gun. Harry quickly covered his mouth. Why did you appear here? Have you been defeated by the bad guys? I came across some, Tony said, a little embarrassed. It's not defeated, just. Harry was excited. You're planning a comeback. Right. I can help you. Is there anything I can help you with? Half an hour later, Tony ate a cold sandwich the little boy had stolen from the fridge while using the garage's battery to recharge his armor. He was wearing his father's clothes that the little boy had stolen. While repairing the armor, Tony coaxed Harry not to tell him about his existence. At the same time, Lu Lin launched a raid on the stronghold of the 10 Rings Gang. To be precise, he went in and killed the leader, and the agents left the rest to the agents. It is said that it is the 10 Rings Gang, but in fact, these people are people from the AIM company. AIM has a fairly deep relationship with the military, otherwise where would the veterans who were discharged because of their disabilities come from? Originally, Killian was very hidden, and no one knew that the 10 Rings Gang had anything to do with AIM. Therefore, even though the 10 Rings Gang has been carrying out terrorist activities, it still has not affected AIM's business. But now that the matter is so big, AIM is no longer good, and no one dares to risk the world's condemnation to shield AIM at this time. Overnight, AIM was wiped out in all of New York. Originally, the military also tried to protect Killian and AIM. After all, they are studying super soldiers, and they have certain research results. Why are they willing to give up this person? As we all know, the US military has always been obsessed with the super soldier plan. But they didn't want to be involved in terrorist attacks at all, especially SHIELD came forward. The military people also said, I don't care about this person, you love it. As a result, Lu Lin's actions were not hindered at all, and he easily cleaned up all of AIM's strongholds and branches in New York. In addition to these places, there are also AIM branches in other parts of the United States, but those places Lu Lin is too lazy to go out in person, just hand it over to SHIELD. As for AIM's headquarters, it was Tony's toy, and Lu Lin wouldn't go to grab it with Tony. He just needed to snatch Killian's head at the end. The only pity is that Killian doesn't know if he got the wind beforehand, or what's going on. Lu Lin never found him in New York. He guessed that this guy must have fallen in love with Tony and killed him at headquarters. All in all, when the last minute, Lu Lin appeared again and snatched the head. As for what happened to Tony now, it was none of Lulin's business. Anyway, as long as he doesn't die, it's over. Lulin is not Tony's babysitter, and she has to watch him not let him have an accident. This is Tony's own business, he should have let him solve it himself. Lulin is not a vendetta, absolutely not. Thor, meanwhile, meets a group of scientists on his way to Mexico. What did you say? Jane looked at Thor and said a little amused, are you Thor? That's right, Thor said with a serious look. I'm participating in a trial for the throne that belongs to the Asgard god domain. Thor was a brainless guy who explained everything without any hesitation. Although my brother has already started the trial one step ahead of me. Thor was confident, but I'm confident that I can successfully pass the trial before him. We are scientists. Jane laughed. We say materialism, we don't believe in gods, ghosts, monsters or whatever. Materialism. Thor wondered, what is that? A specialty of Midgard. I have to say, Thor, you still have some research on mythology. Jane smiled and said, but I won't believe you. That's not certain. Jane's companion said next to him, you see everything came out before. Are you going to say something about demons you heard from your friends, skeleton knights and so on? Jane rolled her eyes. I told you, those are all urban legends, not credible. The woman shrugged. I don't want to quarrel with you, but I can only say that there are still many unsolved mysteries in the world. You should know better than me, Jane. Jane took a deep breath. She didn't want to quarrel with her companion. This is not the first time they have debated this issue, but there has been no result in an argument. Jane was a staunch materialist. She didn't believe in magic and gods, and even though she was a Christian, she never went to church, let alone chose to believe in messy things. But her friend was different. She was extremely interested in these mysticism, urban legends and the like, and often studied these related things. Including this trip to Mexico, Jane is also to prove that there are no messy things in the world. There is only science in this world. Jane thinks that as long as her companions realize that the world is really real, she will obediently believe in herself. Any hammer that no one can pick up, it's all fart. This possibility simply does not exist. Jane said with certainty. It must be a trick used by the locals to attract tourism. It's not worth believing at all. There must be some mechanism up there. No, except for those who have been approved by Mjolnir. No one else can take Mjolnir, I am extremely sure of this. Thor interjected confidently. Shut up. If you talk nonsense again, I'll kick you off the car. Jane said viciously. Thor immediately closed his mouth and indicated that he would no longer speak. After being tortured by modern society, Thor has become much more mature, not to mention that he has now lost his own divine power. In the past, he would definitely let this woman know the fate of humiliating Thor, but now, in order to complete the trial, Thor felt that it was better to follow Jane's rules for now. After all, if Jane didn't take herself, he would have been forced to walk to Mexico. It's so far away, God knows when he's going. While Thor and his future actress are arguing and heading to Mexico, Stark finally kills Killian. Killian also tried to kidnap Pepper to threaten Tony, but unfortunately, with Lulin's reminder, Pepper was already on guard. Not surprisingly, Killian's plan naturally fell through. At this point in time, although Killian's research has almost perfected, he has not yet reached a deep cooperation with the military, so his experimental materials are very few. Except for some well-trained ordinary people, there are not many genetic warriors under him who have been modified by desperate viruses. The few, most of which are also unstable. Only the desperate virus in Killian himself is relatively stable. Therefore, although Tony does not have as many armored teams as in the original book, he now only needs to deal with Killian alone. The two of them fought you back and forth, half a pound and 8 tails. Lulin, who was hiding in the shadows, took the opportunity to give Killian such a knife, successfully snatched Killian's head and won the mission reward. All this was done without knowing it, even Tony didn't know it. And after that, Tony went headlong into the lab. This time, it only took him half a day to come out. After this time, he has completely perfected his armor, and he even used nanotechnology to raise the combat effectiveness of the warframe to a higher level again. As for the energy source, he chose to install a few more reactors. When Lulin saw Tony again, even Lulin was taken aback. Alas, why are you holding on? Lu Lin shook his head helplessly. Then he snapped his fingers, and Tony's face visibly improved. What's going on? What have you done to me? Tony glanced at Lu Lulin in surprise. It's just a small metal element poisoning, look at your ghost appearance. Lu Lin rolled his eyes. Test your current physical state. Tony glanced at the vital signs detector he was carrying, and was surprised to find that the content of palladium in his body had dropped to 0. How did you do it? Tony looked at Lu Lin in surprise. A healing magic, Lu Lin said lightly. I told you that I can do a lot of magic, have you forgotten? Also, if you really can't figure it out, ask Fury, maybe he knows something. How do you know this? Tony glanced at Lu Lulin suspiciously. Have you forgotten that I am God of Asgard? Lu Lin said with a shrug. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.